Well, my book is called The Dollhouse, a ghost story. And I haven't got the cover yet, the actual book in my hand, but I have this picture of the cover. And as you can tell, it's about a haunted house. Alice and her mother go to spend the summer in a big, spooky mansion. In the attic is a locked room. In the locked room is a dollhouse. The dollhouse looks exactly like the big house. The very first night in the haunted house, Alice wakes up and finds a ghost in her bed. And the ghost looks exactly like one of the dolls in the dollhouse. From then on, Alice is on a wild ride, never sure if she is asleep or awake, and if the people around her are ghosts or dolls or real people. She discovers secret passages, hidden rooms, and a family tragedy. So as you can tell, The Dollhouse is a very spooky ghost story, but it's a lot more than that. Alice's parents are talking about getting a divorce, and all through the book, she's struggling with the sadness she feels about her family breaking up. As she tries to solve the mystery of the haunted dollhouse, she must call on all her inner strength and courage to confront her worst fears about life and death. I was inspired by a house. A few years ago, I met a woman named Ruth, and she was elderly, and she lived in this beautiful old Georgian house. And as soon as I walked into the house, I fell in love with it. It had high ceilings and great big windows and lovely furniture and thick carpets. And it had china and these wonderful antiques. And I found myself looking around the house, and there were funny little corners and hidden staircases. And I fell in love with the house, and I knew right away I had to write a book about this house. And then I got to know Ruth, and we got to be very good friends. And she showed me her dollhouse. She had a dollhouse in her bedroom, and we used to go and play with her dollhouse whenever I visited her. And she would show me all the little miniatures and the beautiful things she had for it. So then I knew I was going to write a book about this big Georgian mansion, and also there was going to be a dollhouse in it. But there was one place in the house that I wasn't allowed to go, and that was the attic, because Ruth said the stairs were too steep and she was afraid I'd hurt myself. And to get to the attic, you had to open up this cupboard on the second floor and walk in, and the stairs went up through the cupboard to the attic. So one day I got a friend to come with me, and we went up together. And as soon as I walked into the attic, I know, okay, this has got to go in the book. It was this lovely room with beautiful windows and kind of shadowy and empty and spooky. So then I knew I had a book. Okay, I had the house, I had the dollhouse, and I had the spooky attic. So I had all these ideas just jumping in my head, and I started to write. So in terms of the research I had to do, I set part of the story in the 1920s. So I had to do some research about technology then, like did they have radios or telephones? What did they look like? Things like that. And also the clothes I had to research. But one of the most fun things I did was to research dollhouses. I'd seen Queen Mary's dollhouse at Windsor Castle in London, in England, years ago. And I was very impressed at the time by the level of detail and the luxuriousness of that dollhouse. So I wanted to make my dollhouse as good as Queen Mary's dollhouse. So I got a lot of books and I studied them, and I worked on that to try to make the dollhouse as beautiful as possible. I think one of the other things that inspired me besides the house was the books that I read when I was a child. I like books like the Narnia books and the Borrowers, The Secret Garden, The Story Girl, and Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. All these books were my favorites, and I just loved reading them over and over again. And I loved the magic in them. There was like a little bit of magic in most of them. What else I liked about them was that often they were books about a character who had an inner journey. As well as having adventures, they went on an inner journey. So that by the end of the book, the main character was a little different than they had been at the beginning. And they would grow and change and discover that they had inner resources of strength and courage and compassion. And they learn kind of what it's like to be human. And so in my books, I always have this inner journey that a character is going on. And that's as important to me as the fun that they have and the adventures with the ghosts. So that's really, those are some of the things that inspired me to write this book. There's an educator's guide. It's going to be available on tundrabooks.com, so you can look that up, and that'll give you all kinds of ideas. But I also have a couple of ideas myself for discussion. If you're reading the book in the classroom, the first one is divorce. The book does talk a bit about divorce and about Annie's reaction to her parents' troubles. And at one point in the book, she says to them, don't go away and talk about this without me. I need to be included in the discussion because this affects me as much as it affects you. And I think that's a really important part of the book. And it's also something that kids can relate to, because a lot of children have to go through divorce, and to be able to talk about it freely, I think, is really good for them. And also to see that Annie takes some control, because I think one of the worst things for kids going through divorces are that they really feel helpless. They don't have control. So I think that could bring up some interesting discussions. And the other thing that you might want to talk about with the kids is, depending on the age level, is death. Now, they say you can't make an omelet without breaking the eggs, and you can't really write a ghost story without having somebody die. So all of my books, at some level, they deal with death, and I want it that way. That's why I write about ghosts. I want to write about death for children, because children think about it, and they think about it, and they go over it, and they worry about it, and they have all kinds of ideas. And so I think to generate a discussion where the kids are talking about death in relation to the book, like what does Annie feel about it, and what does she think it's like to be dead, and what are her reactions? So in the book, death almost becomes a character. So I think that would be also a really helpful thing to talk about with kids. Now I just wanted to talk a little bit about my other books, because I do write a lot of novels about ghosts. And so I'm just going to tell you, show you quickly. This is my first novel called The Swallow. It's about two girls, Polly and Rose. And Polly, they live behind a cemetery, and Polly really wants to see a ghost. And Rose wants to stop seeing them because she's haunted by ghosts all the time. So that's a good story. And then my second book was called The Painting. This is about a little girl named Annie, and she has this picture on the wall in her room, this painting of a lighthouse in Newfoundland. And one night she discovers that she can walk inside the painting and go up and visit this lighthouse, where she meets a mysterious person who becomes her friend. So that's my second book. And the third novel is called The Ghost Road. And it's about two cousins who live in a community in just for the summer in Newfoundland, and they discover that their family has a curse on it, and they have to make their way down the long, lonely ghost road and try and break the curse. So that's another ghostly story. And one other book that you might like, if you love ghost stories, I do write a lot of Newfoundland ghost stories, and this book's called Screech: Ghost Stories from Old Newfoundland, and it's got a very spooky cover. It's illustrated by Genevieve Sims, and it's 10 ghost stories that are traditional Newfoundland stories that I've rewritten and reimagined. And each story has a section at the end called The Story Behind the Story, where you can read about the place in Newfoundland where the story happens, and something about the ghost, what kind of a ghost it is in the story. And also I talk about the original storyteller who told it to me. So those are just a few of my other books, but I think that if you like ghost stories, you might want to look them up. And you can find them on my website, www.chariscotter.ca. And you can also write to me at chariscotter@gmail.com. I do. I'm doing a lot of them over the last year. I've managed to go to all kinds of places that I wouldn't get to in person, like Labrador and the far-flung west coast of Newfoundland, which is a long way from me. So I love doing author visits, and I also do in-person visits. So if you'd like to contact me in person to book a visit, my Gmail is chariscotter@gmail.com. And you can also find me through Authors Booking Service, ABS at authorsbooking.com. You can book me through them also. So again, if you want to look at my website, it's www.chariscotter.ca. Thank you for listening. And once again, I'm Charis Cotter, and this is my new book, The Dollhouse, a ghost story. And I hope you get a chance to read it. I think you're going to really enjoy it. Thank you.